Hello all. Once again I'm back with one of the most interesting and fascinating chapters of physiology, that is menstrual cycle and estrus cycle. This is also known as Utero-Ovarian cycle. As you know that both are physiologically same, but they are not seen physiologically equal in all the animals, including the human. Menstrual cycle is the characteristic feature of the primates, mammalian primates, including the human and the monkeys, whereas estrus cycle is seen in case of mammalian non-primates like cow, buffalo, sheep, goat, horses, pig, dog, cat, like this. But physiologically and conceptually both are same. The only one difference which is visible in terms of morphological changes or the discharge, that is known as the periodical vaginal bleeding or the periodical vaginal bleeding discharge, which is not observed in case of estrus cycle, except few exceptions are few, but in general bleeding is not observed. Now the question arises, what fundamental difference is there between estrus cycle and menstrual cycle? That is our coming lecture. But the most important is to understand the physiological basis of this estrus cycle or menstrual cycle. So first I am drawing a very common diagram which will show the physiological basis of these cycles, and then we'll try to understand how the hypothalamus, the pituitary gland, the ovary, they are involved and they crosstalk with each other from the down to the up and up to the down. Thereby they regulate the peripheral structure that's known as uterus. This cycle prepares the uterus for the future purpose of pregnancy, and it is the characteristic feature which occurs after sexual maturity, that we can say puberty in case of animals. It is the crosstalk between the uterus, ovary, hypothalamus and the pituitary gland, which is complex, no doubt, but their regulatory and control mechanisms are well studied and well known. So let's begin this flowchart. Very common cycle. So the common one is the estrus cycle. Today I am with here this estrus cycle. This is commonly known as the Utero-Ovarian cycle. That means in this cycle the uterus is involved as well as the ovary is involved. So there is a hormonal interplay is going on between these two structures and the master regulatory structures on the upper part, that is the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland. Literally saying, estrus cycle is where the animal is showing estrus, which in the layman word is known as heat, that is the period of receptivity, and we can say it as it is the period where the female shows the receptivity for the male. Female for male receptivity increases, and that's known as the estrus cycle. But now the question arises, if this receptivity increases, then why there are two words? One is uterus and the second one is the ovary. That means it clearly says that somewhere at some place both the uterus and ovary are involved. In other language, when we say about menstrual cycle, which is physiologically the same, but it is the characteristic feature of the primates. And here we focus on the human menstrual cycle. No doubt, the monkeys, they also show the same menstrual cycle. In the menstrual cycle, there is a periodical vaginal bleeding is observed, which is not seen in case of the estrus cycle. And if I'll say the characteristic picture, this is the characteristic picture of mammals, no doubt, but we'll say it as the non-primates. Now, two very important questions which comes to my mind. Let us ask that why this cycle occurs. What is the physiological relevance of this cycle? Now, the second question which arises, what hormones are actually playing the important role? And why uterus and ovary both are involved one in other way? So let us understand this concept. So to understand in a better way this concept, we have to go back into our reproductive physiology classes. There we'll get an overview, and in that overview we'll come to the conclusion that why actually this cycle occurs. Now the point to be noted is that menstrual cycle in a literal language is known as, it is the crying of the uterus for the funeral of oocyte. So this is that point. It is the crying of the uterus for the funeral of the oocyte. That means again here the uterus word is coming and also the oocyte. And what do you mean by funeral? That means the oocyte is dying, and that's why the uterus is crying. So literally saying, it's a dynamic feature where the oocyte is not fertilizing, rather the oocyte is being dead, or otherwise we can say that in this the sperm is not finding the oocyte to fuse, or in other sense we can say the oocyte is waiting to the sperm to come and fertilize, and by some hook or crook mechanism the sperm is trying, but the oocyte is not ultimately fertilized. Therefore the oocyte is dying, and as a consequence to this the uterus is very sad, and the uterus is showing its tear in the form of bleeding, and that blood comes out of the vagina, and we say that it's menstrual cycle, a cycle of a month. Same, a cycle of a month. Similarly, the estrous cycle is just similar to that of the menstrual cycle. It is also periodical, and it occurs in a month-wise manner depending on the animals, because its length is different in different animals. So in our coming lectures, we'll try to understand how much estrous cycle exists in different animals and how it technically differs from that of the menstrual cycle. So the introduction is over. Now let's understand what actually a oocyte is and what the oocyte is made for, and why the oocyte is not getting fertilized, and if it gets fertilized then estrous cycle or the menstrual cycle is not occurring. So the take home message is that if the oocyte is failed to fertilize, then the outcome is estrous cycle or menstrual cycle, and if the oocyte is being fertilized by the sperm, then there is no concept of menstrual cycle or oocyte, and rather the concept is of pregnancy or the gestation. So let's understand how this process goes on. Let's draw a very simple flowchart to make or to have a clear understanding of this process. Just have a concept. This starts from the ovary, the master structure. The ovary simultaneously undergoes the gametogenesis or oogenesis, and followed by the formation of the follicles, that is folliculogenesis. Both are different. In oogenesis, the primordial germ cells of the ovary, they are converted into oocyte or the egg cell, and in the folliculogenesis there is the trapping of the oocyte by means of the follicular cells, and thereby it forms a follicle. The combination of this oocyte and the follicle gives rise to the matured follicle, which is known as the Graafian follicle. We will discuss in vivid in our coming lectures what is oogenesis, what is folliculogenesis, how a Graafian follicle is formed. But for the time being, a Graafian follicle is present in ovary, and this Graafian follicle is the matured follicle, is the dominant follicle. Once it attains its regular size of 18 to 20 mm different animals, it undergoes a ovulatory response. Now question arises, what do you mean by ovulatory response? Why the ovulatory signal goes and from where it comes? So this is our coming lecture. So stay tuned for my lectures. And the second point is that why the Graafian follicle is able to show a LH surge, means how the Graafian follicle sends the message to the central structures like the hypothalamus and pituitary to secrete the hormone which is known as luteinizing hormone, that is known as LH. This LH is going to bring out the process of ovulation. Now the point arises, who tells the LH to get secreted? And once it is secreted, where it acts? Now it acts on the graphene follicle, and that goes the process that known as ovulation. Now several questions. What do you mean by LH surge? Number 2, why LH surge occurs? Number 3, how this surge activates the hypothalamic-hypophyseal axis to release the LH, and then how this LH is acting on the graphene follicle to carry out the process of ovulation. Meanwhile, ovulation has occurred, and in the form there is the release of the secondary oocyte. This secondary oocyte can remain up to 36 hours to 48 hours depending on various species of animals, and after that it is not able to get fertilized. With exceptions are there. In some it can remain up to months, but in general it stays up to 36 to 48 hours in different animals. So once the secondary oocyte is waiting, or in a layman language, if the egg is waiting, definitely it is waiting for the mating response. And once the mating response is being there, the sperm will come, and the traveling of the sperm, or the journey of the sperm, as in my capacitation lectures I have said, it's always dynamic. And after completing the cyclic process of journey, the sperm reach the secondary oocyte. So let's think in this way. There are two possibilities. The sperm is coming and it fuses with the oocyte. Then it's known as fertilization. And once fertilization occurs, this gives rise to the zygote. Then the zygote develops to form the embryo. Several question marks are coming. I have designed around 50 lectures on this, that how the zygote develops to embryo. What do you mean by zygote? What do you mean by fertilization? This is going to be in details. So as this is an introductory lecture, so we are very much confined to the words only, and we are trying to understand what's going on. So once fertilization is over, zygote develops, and followed by the zygote undergoes series of divisions, and thereafter it forms the embryo. And once this embryo is being attached to the uterus, that process is known as implantation. Now the embryo is being attached to the uterus, and once it is attached, it further develops, and the germinal layers are developed, and due to the germ layer develop, then the extra embryonic membrane that develops, and that's known as placenta, and the process is being known as placentation. And after the process of placentation, this pregnancy continues. So this is the normal life cycle of an oocyte. It's a common sense that once the placenta is being formed, the pregnancy is going to continue if there is no physiological disturbance. During this time, when ovulation occurs, this graphene follicle is converted into a structure which is known as corpus luteum. Now question arises, what do you mean by corpus luteum? How it is formed? How it is staying in the ovary? And what it causes? So it causes the secretion of the most important steroid hormone of the female body, that's known as progesterone. And this progesterone helps in the process of implantation as well as in the process of placentation. So in the failure of the progesterone, implantation and placentation cannot occur. That's why this is commonly known as the hormone of pregnancy. And this progesterone hormone, its target site is uterus. Glandular, muscular, vascular, tonic growth of the uterus is completely regulated by this hormone progesterone. It means in the presence of the corpus luteum, the progesterone secretion is maintained from the basal level to the tonic level to the higher level, and that concentration is capable enough of keeping the embryo intact in the uterus, and the pregnancy continues. So it is the corpus luteum of pregnancy that play a very important role up to 6 months of age, when after that the placenta takes the role and it starts secreting the progesterone. Thereby the total process of gestation will be complete and pregnancy will terminate in the process that's known as parturition. But think the concept that when this mechanism is failed, that means the secondary oocyte after ovulation, when it is not able to meet the sperm, that means I can say here there is a fertilization failure. That means fertilization failed. And once fertilization failed, these egg remain up to 36 to 48 hours in max or 72 hours in max, and thereafter this egg undergoes the death. That means the egg is not surviving. And we can think in that way also, that there is no mating or there is no sperm, so that's why there is no fertilization, and egg is waiting for the sperm and it is not able to fertilize. Thereafter it undergoes the process that's known as the death. But what has happened to the corpus luteum? We have seen that the Graafian follicle, after the process of ovulation, it gives rise to the corpus luteum, and the corpus luteum secretes the progesterone hormone, which carries out these processes as I explained. But in the absence of fertilization, this corpus luteum cannot secrete progesterone for more than 3 to 4 days. That means the corpus luteum undergoes a degeneration, by virtue of which the progesterone is not secreted. And once the progesterone is not secreted, the uterus is not going to show that kind of growth which was seen during the time of gestation. And glandular muscular vascular growth is completely said to be arborated. That means the uterus undergoes shedding. The uterus undergoes degeneration. The vascular lining gets shedded off, and that's why the bleeding occurs, and it comes out through the vagina. That's known as vaginal bleeding. We say it as menstrual cycle in case of primates. In case of animals, this is estrous cycle, because that blood, that shedded epithelium don't come outside, rather they get absorbed. So this is the mechanism behind that. But several questions which are still unanswered, that is, in the absence of this pregnancy, in the absence of this fertilization, why the corpus luteum is dying? Because that's the point, and that's the most important point to know, that in the absence of a pregnancy or in the absence of fertilization, the uterine endometrium secretes the PGF2 alpha, the prostaglandin F2 alpha, and this is that hormone which is known as luteolytic. That means this hormone acts on the corpus luteum and it causes the degeneration of the corpus luteum. That means during the pregnancy, when there is pregnancy or fertilization is there followed by the pregnancy is there, then maternal recognition of pregnancy occurs. What is maternal recognition of pregnancy? That means the embryo signals the uterus that you are pregnant, and that uterus gets that signal and get modified in that way. That maternal recognition of pregnancy occurs due to the biomessengers or the chemical messengers. Just for example, human chorionic gonadotropin in case of human, interferon tau in case of ruminants, and that causes, that interferon tau or that SCG causes the inhibition of secretion of the PGF2 alpha, and therefore the PGF2 alpha is not able to cause the degeneration of the corpus luteum, and hence the corpus luteum goes on secreting the progesterone to maintain the pregnancy. But in the absence of the fertilization of the pregnancy, the PGF2 alpha is secreted because of absence of MRP, the maternal recognition of pregnancy. So guys, with this introductory lecture is over. I have given a big overview that what actually the fate of the oocyte, what the oocyte carries out, what are the features which occurs inside the oviduct. If fertilization occurs, pregnancy continues. If the fertilization is not occurring, there is no term like pregnancy, and therefore the corpus luteum is not able to maintain the progesterone level or the progesterone secretion. The uterus is not going to maintain its vascularity, its glandularity, its tonicity, and therefore it undergoes deciduation or shedding, and that's what known as menstrual cycle. And if it is absorbed in the non-primates and it is not coming in the form of vaginal bleeding, then we are saying it as estrous cycle. So with this lecture comes to an end. Before leaving this class, I am giving you one question. What do you mean by maternal recognition of pregnancy? What do you mean by luteolysis? What do you mean by luteinization? What do you mean by corpus luteum lifespan? What do you think that PGF2 alpha is doing and why it is secreted? What do you mean by progesterone and how the progesterone is maintaining the process of pregnancy? All these questions will be answered in the next class. So stay tuned for my lecture, and if you really liked my lecture, then please have a like and subscription to my channel to stay tuned for these updated lectures next class. So stay tuned, have a wonderful time in learning. See you soon next with this lecture content. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful time.